Good morning. I've been sitting on an article and I was kind of waiting to see if there would be a response. I've been waiting for this for so long, just for someone to ask the right questions, and they're finally doing that here. I'm gonna go over the first article from Metal Hammer. I did this like a week ago. If you are familiar with it already and you want to skip ahead to... I wanted to touch base about Manson. A little article came out that his team did not want to come out because he couldn't pull it together and answer some questions. He has this pattern in his interviews, and they fucking call him out on it here. Finally, someone's asking him about the Me Too movement, his ex-girlfriends that are heavily involved in it, especially Evan Rachel Wood, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back and just made him walk out. It's not the 90s anymore. You have to answer for your behavior now. I know in the 90s you could just do stuff like this and it was cool and fine and shocking, but now a lot of male musicians are being questioned years later for what was very misogynistic, influential, just very bad ideals. I always thought that he just tries to be shocking. Listen to this paragraph. I was never trying to be controversial or shocking. He says now of his notoriety circa Antichrist superstar. But I was aware that the key to upheaval is hitting somebody directly in the face, putting a mirror to them and saying, "This is you." His aim was to shake things up. Religion, Christianity, basically. More than that, to make people see that politics and religion are secondary to art. And I've heard him say that before, that's more than anything his goal, to make people see that politics and religion are secondary to art. He does talk about a lot of personal things if you've ever read his interviews, but now it's a very sensitive subject. He was asked, is he surprised he hasn't been canceled? He says, I don't think that's something worth addressing. And to answer your question, you can go back to the very first thing I said about Antichrist superstar Columbine. That answers your question. He's referring to his comment that confusion is the way you change culture. That maybe artists shouldn't have to explain themselves, but let their art do the talking. But there are some things we'd like to talk about. Wow, dude, this is packed. Confusion is the way you change culture. You are just Lucifer himself. There's so much around him, his cronies. There's so much. It's just a whole culture of misogyny and sexual abuse because it's the things that he believes, man. Like, listen to him. He thinks he's above the law. He's above addressing even the question about Evan Rachel Wood. And you're talking about something that ruined her life. He says, I get that you'd have to ask a question like that, but I won't qualify it with an answer. His team freaked out, called Metal Hammer, and was like, are you crazy? Why did you bring up Evan Rachel Wood? Maybe because journalism isn't dead. I mean, they finally asked the question, and he basically just walked out. He basically said, my art is more important than the fact that I abused a woman or two. He can't distance himself from all the crap that he did because there's too much of it. There's too much of it to cover up. There's too much of it to pay off. You got a whole Instagram handle dedicated to the trauma that you caused young women. So he says he's afraid of the possibility that art and people's freedom of speech is going to be choked. That's one of my fears, is that freedom of speech is going to be choked, because it is. It is, as we speak, being choked out. What he's afraid of is something different. He's made a living off of things that are controversial in nature, I think what he's afraid of is, more than anything, is being caught. They also talk about Esme Bianco in this article. They start asking him about, you know, what did you think about the Me Too movement? What do you think? Because all your girlfriends are involved in it. So what do you think about that? So he's like, it's not worth addressing. I talk about music, not rumors. Tell me good questions about the music and we'll continue, he says. So you only want to talk about the new album? You don't want to talk about the allegations against you? There's no allegations against me. I'm not going to talk about it. Rumors. Then silence. So if he was so calm and just didn't want to talk about it and he's not guilty, then why is his team freaking out right after that? Because his team calls Hammer right after that saying, like, can you please not run it? They offer him an opportunity to clarify his comments and position on the issues, but he turns it down. It is frustrating that an artist who was never afraid to take on the bastions of power and their abuses is suddenly ducking the issue of personal abuse and the culture that for so long has either ignored it or glorified it. He tries to answer the question without answering the question. Talks about holding a mirror to society, then let's talk about a mirror to himself. What he sees when he gazes into that mirror isn't clear because right now the phone line is silent and so is Marilyn Manson. Metal Hammer, thank you very much. And the writer of this is my hero now, Dave Everly. What is with these guys? What is this follow-up later? I don't have to answer under oath, or I don't have to answer you ever kind of attitude with these guys. We saw it in the hearings with Dorsey and Zuckernerd, and now we see Manson. He can't even answer a fucking question. Think about how many people we lost in the 90s, you know, and some of the people that, you know, were some of the best writers, some people that I loved, you know, like great souls. And then you have this fucker who just hangs around. I look at the guy, I look at his deeds, and it's pretty clear to me that he's evil. Like, that kind of stuff's pretty black and white. And this is one that we've just allowed to exploit our society and pervert our youth. I don't know what the hell his fans think. Most of them that comment are almost proud. Most of them are very callous towards women or any of the violence he's done, and they do see him as that God figure, which is surprising. A lot of people still think that he's impressive just because he's simply managed to stay alive between the 90s and now, because so many great people didn't. And it's such a shame that out of so many great people, now we're stuck with this fucking guy. Stuck with him. Anyway, that was my update on Manson. Thought that was pretty significant that he walked out of an interview. So once it came out, I definitely wanted to do a video about it. After this article came out, Metal Hammer came out with another article, the 10 questions we would like Marilyn Manson to answer. And they gave him a list of questions, and these were all very comprehensive. They all had to do with everything that's going on with Evan Rachel Wood's testimony, the glorification of violence, his statement about harming himself on Christmas when Evan Rachel Wood broke up with him, Esme Bianco, the Phoenix Act, and also Rose McGowan. And they asked him if one of his songs off the new album, if it could be considered threatening to someone who's claiming victimhood. Okay, so I want to read you word for word how he answers these questions because it's moronic. It's not him, this is like his team. So this is the statement from his PR representative. We have advised our client not to comment further on your article. Personal testimony is just that, and we think it's inappropriate to comment on that. You then go on to talk about Manson being accused of terrible things by unnamed critics, but offer no guidance on who these critics are and what these things are, so it's not possible to comment. You then mention Mickey Rourke. It is my understanding that Evan Rachel Wood dated multiple people around the time she was dating Manson. Basic internet research will give you a host of other names that have not come up in any of our discussions. Your next couple of points deal with comments Manson made in Spin magazine in 2009. Go back to I think it's in part 1 and part 2, because he said so much shit. He was high on truth serum. I don't know what made him be so honest, but that interview is very problematic for him. So it says, your next couple of points deal with the comments Manson made in Spin in 2009. Your confusion around the timeline of this is extremely worrying. Editor's note, there's no confusion around this timeline. Literally, there isn't. It was 2009 and it was a Spin article. So, the comments in Spin where Manson had a fantasy of using a sledgehammer on Evan and he cut himself 150 times was absolutely a theatrical rock star interview promoting a new record and not a factual account. The fact that Evan and Manson got engaged 6 months after this interview would indicate that no one took this story literally. Evan did. She testified that he used self-harm as a manipulation tool to keep her around. After she tried to break up with him, he cut himself. Every time he called her on Christmas Day, he cut himself. It was 158 times he had cut himself. By the time she got over there, she describes being tortured. I go over this in my part 2. So this all lines up. The fact that they're saying that it's a rock star interview, no. There's a lot more cooler things that you could do than, I don't know, I don't think that's why little boys go into rock and roll. You go on to talk about Manson commenting on sexual harassment, Me Too, and specifically the experiences of his ex-partner Rose McGowan. These are all issues that Manson has publicly addressed and are available online. Please see Channel 4 interview from December 2017. So I saw Channel 4 interview from December 2017, and I will insert here the only relevant statement that he makes regarding that.
Hollywood has been rocked by this huge scandal of the allegations against Harvey Weinstein, and of course one of the most prominent alleged victims is one of your ex-partners, Rose McGowan. Were you surprised by it?
I'm not surprised by it. I didn't really know much about it when I was with her. I mean, when there's serious allegations, and there are always allegations, of course, but, I mean, it's, when someone starts complaining about something that happened that seems a little bit not as serious as really sexual assault, because I think that's insulting to people that have been sexually assaulted. And it pisses me off that when someone says, oh, someone gave me an inappropriate gift or something, that's not the same as being harmed. I'm a very vengeful person, so I'm very protective of loved ones, especially in relationships. I just don't want to see this turn Hollywood into something that takes away from films being made. And that's not to disrespect the people that are saying these allegations. I just think that if you have something to say, you should say it to the police, not to the press. And handle it that way, first and foremost. And that's what I would do. I mean, I'm guilty as charged when it comes to writing a book and talking about my childhood. But I'm not trying to make it into a crazy thing where I can't turn on my phone every day without someone being accused of something. And maybe it's all men are bad, or all men can't do anything inappropriate. You know, it makes you feel like you can't even say, I meet her and say, if I could look at her the wrong way, I'm going to be accused of something wrong. I think the world needs to balance itself out. with what's the proper way of dealing with this type of situation. I just disagree with the entire snowball effect that's happened with it, that it could really ruin a lot of things it could ruin a lot of people's lives. It could ruin you,
so
don't
too
need
late.
To be ruined.
Manson has never shied away from public comment. Equally, he does not have to make the same comment twice. There will be no further comment on specific songs. Your journalist had the opportunity to ask Manson about his music, one of only 2 interviews granted in the UK, and he chose not to. Trying to weave one section of one song from an artist with a 30-plus career to fit a narrative is both disingenuous and troublesome. You mentioned Manson's ex-fiancée Rose McGowan in your questions. Rose is one of the bravest and most outspoken figureheads of the Me Too movement. Manson remains friends with McGowan, and she talks very fondly of their 3.5 years together. There are multiple sources worldwide. I link to a Washington Post article on McGowan's memoir, Brave. You failed to mention Manson's ex-wife, Dita Von Teese, who remains good friends with Manson. Quoting from a Female First article, Dita admits she's been lucky to avoid any abusive episodes in the entertainment industry. There were also numerous articles over multiple years where Evan Rachel Wood speaks very politely about her relationship with Manson. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I appreciate everything he taught me. I just don't think we were right for each other. Finally, you talk about death threats. Manson knows all about that. He has had many. He has spent his career being blamed for everything from Columbine to teenage suicide. Unfortunately, we live in a time where people believe what they read on the internet and feel free to say what they want with no actual evidence. The effects can be catastrophic, and promoting non-fact-based information is wholly irresponsible. All we can try and do as the media and individuals is use facts and truth and not hide behind gossip and conjecture to further our own agendas. You want to talk about truth and facts? All right, let's talk about Rose McGowan, because this is what I've been waiting for. I've been wondering about this the whole time. And she made a statement that was so impressive. She said, I believe survivors. And she said, you're not going to use me as a smokescreen. I'm not going to be your puppet. And I was like, awesome. Good for you, girl. Also, Dita Von Teese, there was no abuse there. This raises kind of a question that is hard for me to grasp, honestly. To me, if something is a pattern, for example, this has happened again and again. 2 women have made statements about it so far. That's not including victims that are unknown, that have made statements on the internet, or witnesses to crimes. So, yeah, I can't believe how they handled it. It's like he really thinks he's just like the wonderful Wizard of Oz. He's like, I will not grant your magazine any questions. Your journalist has monopolized his chances of, picking a genius's brain about any of my other songs. He had the chance of a lifetime. Like, I'm just like, that is good for you, buddy, that you feel that way about yourself. But I don't think anyone else does. Anyway, I'm really happy about this because it just means more and more is going to come out. It's just going to keep rolling. It looks like his name is going to be coming up in some shit. So I'm really happy about that. I'll put both of the articles down in the description. Also, there's a really great YouTuber that has been covering this. I'll link her videos as well. She does a really good at going over it like super comprehensively, whereas I just kind of beat around the bush. I like to make fun of him at the same time. I like to try to make light of very serious content. It's just a coping mechanism, but it doesn't mean that I have any less respect for the topic. This is, something that I'm very passionate about. So anyway, another abuser gets exposed, and it's just the beginning of that. Time's up. Thank you for watching.